2.7 through 2.10. Main thing to notice with this group of projects is that they are all symmetrical about an axis. That you will be able to draw half of this part and then mirror it across an axis and get the other half if you decide to go that way. All right, so symmetry across Y, symmetry across Y. The internal components, not really concerned with. The slot, the rectangle, slot, the holes. One of these needed the holes for reference. Must not have been this one. Those are not critical to the geometry. For not going to necessarily be part of the symmetry in this case. Since they're on both sides, yes, same here. We can include the circles, but the slot, I'm not going to draw half of a slot. I'm not going to draw half of a rectangle. I may put the circle in because it will mirror across and give me usable geometry. Slot or a rectangle will just mirror onto itself and make an underdefined sketch because there's objects on top of other objects. They're sharing the same geometry. Okay, so let's jump over. First one is in inches, so file new. Stay with the part inch. Front plane. I guess my expectation for this week would fall into the you should be developing your workflow. You should be able to locate and kind of navigate through these commands at finding what you need when you need it. Maybe still a little searching for the ones that you haven't used a lot of, but being able to see that you're it's coming easier to you, I guess would be a good way of putting it. So for symmetry, I'm going to go center line, vertical, infinite length. Main reason because of well, that's my axis for the mirror, but infinite length because I just don't want to run out of center line. So bottom middle, and I missed. So up over. This one has the arc, so I can still pull a tangent arc. I just have to pay attention to which way I go. So that it's a tangent, but it's a continuous tangent arc, comes off of the line, and I can bring it up to the close to 90 degrees. But that does not mean that I'm going to get tangency on that second line segment or that continuing line segment. So that would be a place where I would want to go back and look and make sure that I have complete geometry. So the check for tangency is if I drag this, it will stay continuous. When I get that I could pick up my pencil, or I come to that point and I change direction, that's not continuous. That's not a smooth arc. So select, control select, and we'll go tangent. And that will give me enough. Now, my workflow, my preference is to go ahead and put dimensions on this. Because if I get the half fully defined when I mirror it, it's all fully defined. So we're at 5 inches on the overall, 4 inches on the height, and had the center line there. So back out of that. And I get a 0.021018 degrees. Okay, so that would be one that let's go ahead and back out of. And because I got perpendicular and do not see a vertical, right? So that combination of relations, now that one can be vertical, and then it's not going to hurt anything. It picked up perpendicular. It's not going to hurt anything to tell it that it's horizontal. So now when I go back, I have 2 parallel lines, or hopefully have 2 parallel lines, and it will give me the distance rather than a degree. Let's see, kind of weird on the extension line there. All right, and then we had 1.5 to the outside. All right, I guess I grabbed the depth, so how about 0.5 for the depth? Try again, vertical to vertical, 1.5. Let's see, that one's going to be 2 inches through the center. So again, depending on where you select for placing that dimension determines if you get the half dimension or the full dimension. All right, and since this one, well, that one back calculated, I went over to driven. And since I'm selecting here, I'm going to go ahead and put that one to the origin. So I'm not sure why that one went driven. And it did pull it fully defined, so we have the 1.5 inch. Okay, that makes sense. Then that needed to be 5. So I undid one too many. So if I click on that line to verify, bottom middle will be 1 inch. That makes sense. My relations are taking the place of having to put a dimension between those points. Let's see, what were we given for the outside then? Oh, 2.5 to the center. And we got the 0.5, got that. Is this going to be one of those missing dimension ones? Maybe. Okay, so when you are picking your geometry, and I grabbed a midpoint there, if you stay in between the center line and the object you selected, you get a radial or a half dimension. When you drag to the opposite side, then you're going to get the full dimension or diametral dimension. Alright, so we have the 2.5. So at that point, let's see if those can go horizontal. No, we still need a dimension to size. So, oh, there it is, 1 inch. I was missing it. Oh, have the point selected. Still have the point selected. And go 1 inch. All right, so window picking from right to left, everything crossing the window, including the center line. There's no additional center lines to confuse it, so when I tell it to mirror, I'm going to get the mirrored entity. For the slot then, I think I want to be on the center point straight slot. So the straight slot is kind of the end point to end point. The center point will allow me to pick so that it's on my center line. We drag it out some distance, and so basically the difference in the slots is this is going to create the whole length of slot. The center point straight slot will be half of it from the center line out. Alright, so dimension and 0.5. Let's see, 1 inch off of the base. And one of the things to keep in mind with the slots is this is kind of a macro, a group. I don't know what the best terminology is, but notice when you select any of the items, everything is picked. So you can come over, right click, and say to explode the slot to get it into individual pieces of geometry. Unless you have to, or the geometry that you're creating requires you to, try to just leave that as the slot geometry. The alternative for creating the slot would be to go line. I missed. We'll go line, come back to the start point, do the tangent. So if I needed a partial slot or part of the geometry, I can generate it about as fast as exploding it and then getting all of this to go back to fully defined. So let's go ahead and explode it and see what happens. So right click, explode slot. Now everything's pretty well defined. Alright, so it didn't lose the definitions. I know previously I've had everything go back to blue, so either the dimensions or the relations, I lost something. But now those are individual items. If I want to delete one, I can delete it. But I think it's still going to be better overall to keep the slot as the slot geometry. 1.25, and we'll save. Alright, so again, I don't have to include the slot. I don't have to nest that into my first sketch. It can be separate. It's, again, kind of whatever makes sense as you're building out this geometry. And wherever you can use symmetry, you're going to identify and try to, let's see, next one is also in inches, so 27, 28, nope, next one is metric. I wanted to jump down. Pretty much identify the symmetry, draw half, go through that that process. All right, so 27, 28, 29, 210. Looking at this, there's a couple of ways that we could approach it. We'll probably put the arc in last. Well, let's do it as if it was full symmetry. We're going to draw exactly 1/2 so that we can use the center point arc and some of the arcs that might not make it into the mix as often. So center line, horizontal, infinite length, and missed. Alright, so that still didn't go fully defined, so I'm going to select, control select, force it into coincident. If I want the left side arc, I'm going to go center point arc. We'll drag out and drag through. If for some reason the arc doesn't go the way you want it to, drag, kind of keep dragging until you get it to the direction and the size that you want. And then I'm just going to kind of use the scroll wheel mouse to pan and zoom. All right, the outside fillets I'm not worried about. So I've got vertical. We're going to go for the notch. There again, to stop and go to the jog line or some other command. Most of the time I can sketch it about as fast as I can go to go find that other command and get it to do what I want it to do. All right, so center point is going to be laying on the center line, so I'll make that coincident. Want those to be a full arc, so that end point and center point can be vertical. And I'm just kind of laying that out to where it's forcing it to be a 90-degree arc. All right, so there's my geometry. We're 100 millimeters across. And let's see, is what else do I have? 85 on the length. So 20 on the width. And 35 on the leg. Alright, so as we get through this, through these steps, 20 for the 2 slots.
Bottom dimension, 85?
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. Moved off of center, so I did, even though I thought I drew from the origin, this line did not pick up coincidence. All right, so that little bit of a jump, whichever one it chose, whatever the last selected, when I went from 95 to 85, it pulled it over 10. Let's stop the dimensions and select, control select. We go back to coincident. That's going to pull it back in. I can drag the arc a little bit, and since it's not doing anything really strange, it's just waiting for its dimension, so radius of 21. All right, and had the center point selected or the origin selected, so we'll back out of that. So it's kind of nice that whatever's highlighted when you go in the dimension command, it goes and picks those, but then it's also, that wasn't really what I wanted or what I was expecting, so Yeah, it's kind of, sometimes it works really well, and then other times I find myself tripping over it. So, all right, 25. All right, so everything's in black except for one line. And so we're at that point where select, control select. The two objects will be collinear. An endpoint in the object would be coincident. I'm going to go with the collinear. We'll use this to introduce the fillet feature, since they're 4 corners, radius of 10. So I'm just going to leave those squared off. Actually, the next one has fillets too. Okay, we'll do sketch fillets on this one, and then the next one will be feature fillets. And let's see, we had 12 millimeters. And 15 millimeters and 15 millimeters. All right. So one of the things with the sketch fillets is that it is adding geometry. It is maybe a little more complexity to the sketch. So you have to decide. Four fillets really isn't going to be that big of a deal. But if I was going to fillet around this whole thing, I would probably be leaning towards the features, because the sketch is just going to get too complicated. Keeping the constrained corners means that it will go back to the be able to go back to those points. All right. So when I pick a vertex, or I pick the line and the line, then I will get the fillet. So previous, probably 2013, 2014 is when they added that you could pick the point, the intersections, and it would generate the fillet for you. Prior to that, you had to pick line, and then it would calculate in between. So that's going to put in the geometry. And since I told the software to make those equal, each of the radiuses that I add, each of the fillets that I add in that command are going to automatically be set to equal. All right, so the window pick, mirror entities, and I have my geometry. So you didn't miss anything. Everything's fully defined. Extrude, thickness of 8. All right. Let's see, so 27, 28 are open. 29. Front plane, sketch. Center line, vertical, infinite length. And again, it doesn't really matter left or right, whatever you see as you see it, and then whoops and whoops. All right, so my mouse battery is getting a little low, maybe. No, I'm just being a little twitchy. All right, so when I miss, when it's off by a little bit, we can go up to the pop-up or come over to the property manager. So the pop-up, if it's not kind of in all of the command manager heads up type stuff, will be my first choice, because then I'm just doing that short mouse click to get to that geometry. Well, so that was selected. It jumped right into the dimension, 1.5. So if I can get those relations out of the inferences, and we're 5 inches overall, I would rather let kind of pay attention to those little yellow boxes as they're popping up, and then pretty much just see that the geometry is being created correctly. But after I've gone through that first group, kind of that first run through of creating my sketch, the items that I missed on, I dropped the point away from the origin, I wasn't vertical, I wasn't horizontal, I'm going to try and go through and add all of those relations that I can recognize. And then when we're putting the dimensions in, as the dimensions go, we'll start seeing the blue objects become black objects. And as it gets to the last couple of dimensions, that's part of our diagnostics of how do I get this to go fully defined, that next step. When we get down to the last one, maybe for instance, we didn't have a coincident here. I'm not going to be able to move up and down, but that left and right, that's giving me a clue that, well, I don't really need a dimension to get this to go fully defined. I need another relation or something that I overlooked or missed. We said the rectangle we'll do as a separate. So again, window picking, right to left, everything crossing. And then I'll go with the extrude. And this is going to be 375 thickness, so 3/8 of an inch. And for this one, let's go with the, let's see, all fillets and rounds, radius of 0.25 unless otherwise stated. So pretty much everything. So this would be a good one for the center point. And I kind of prefer the from corners. Let's see if it'll switch. Nope. Oh, there it went. Okay, I guess it will switch. And I can set that to vertical. Alright, so we were given 2 inches and 3 inches. So pretty much. Okay, there's that 4-headed arrow because I had an endpoint and the line selected. So I'm just going to escape till nothing's selected. If I escape out of the smart dimension, no big deal, I'll just go back into it. Let's see, 1.5 inches for the overall. And so if I applied their dimensions after setting that that vertical relation, then these would go automatically over to being driven dimensions. So in my case, the grayed out. All right, so I can put those in for reference, but they're not going to participate. They're not anything that I can act upon. If I try to change it, this is a driven dimension. All right, this dimension and that relation are driving this geometry, not the 2 dimensions that I just applied. And then we're 2 inches from the base. All right, and then so I didn't draw a center line on this, but we're going to go ahead with pretty close on the inference. So select, Control Select, and make the did it apply? Yeah, so it applied. Make it vertical, and then we're 0.7 off of the base, 0.75. I think it was a radius of 0.25. And then the overall, 2 inches. All right, so again, I could put in a dimension from the drawing, but it's going to go over to being driven and have that grayed out on the extension line. All right, so at this point I haven't applied any sketch fillets, and this is a pretty good example place where I don't really need them. If I rotate over and find one of the fillets, the first time through, it's going to give me just the dimension 0.25, 0.25, not 25. That's going to be a big fillet. All right, and the second time through, I'm going to pick again, and then I get this pop-up. And the pop-up, if you go through, it will show you connected corners, connected to the face, everything, insides, outsides, all of the edges, and convex, concave. So pretty much that was all of the exteriors. That's all of the exterior and interior. When I pick it, I just get everything that was in that mix. So if there was one of these that didn't, it's a lot easier to go back and say, well, maybe I didn't really want that one, than it was to click, 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 go through the whole process. All right, so once I have all of the fillets, so what did we have? 4, 6, I didn't see what it said, 16, 18 fillets. that would be sketch fillets that I would have to draw into those sketches at each of those points, rather than just picking one feature command and being able to generate that geometry. Okay. Let's see. The 210 is in metric. All right. So front plane, sketch. And then this one is showing symmetric. Oh, I guess I need to pull it up. Hopefully I pulled the last one up a couple times. So this one's showing symmetric about both the horizontal and the vertical. And I will pretty much say horizontal and vertical over X and Y because the reference triad gives you an orientation in X and Y. But if you're drawing in Y and Z, are we going to talk about the Y and Z axis or the X and Z axis? Horizontal is normal to your sketch, normal to your geometry, and it goes right back to those relations. So very rarely will you hear me refer to X and Y axes. So the horizontal axis and the vertical axis are both symmetry. So that means that I can draw one corner, mirror across, and have my shape. So we're in the front plane. I'm going to go into the center line, vertical, infinite length. See if I can drop it on the origin this time. Go ahead and accept the line properties because then I can go right back and say horizontal and drop it on the origin. And then we're free to select or escape or whatever we need to get back to the geometry. All right, so line, up, over, up, back. Oh, don't need a section view, don't need to customize. All right, so we're 50 millimeters on the height. So pretty much whichever quadrant I recognize, that's where I'll start the sketch from. And 20 on the depth. Okay, so that also was 20. Okay, I'll jump back to it. I just had to escape once. And then to the center of the circle was 35. And then 50 to the outside. All right, so those are coming in pretty well. 35 to the center of the circle. And 12 millimeters on the holes. Okay, so since we have the two center lines, this time I'm going to go from left to right, pick all of my geometry, and then control select the one that I want. All right, so that goes into mirror. If I don't pre-select, all right, so I haven't grabbed a center line. Going from left to right is everything inside the window. When I go to mirror entities, then I'm going to have to select for mirror about. And then the advantage is that I will see the preview before I generate the geometry. So it's kind of nice, but for the most part, if I have all of this fully defined, when I mirror and mirror, I'm pretty well assured I'm going to get the desired result. I forgot to draw the two little lines here. All right, so if I wanted to include those in the mirror, all right, so if I go from right to left, we've got a lot of little sketch relations going on with all of those symmetries and all of those geometries. So with just two lines, this would be a good time to just go select, and select the first one, hold down the control button, select the second and third, mirror the entities, and then I can always right-click and select chain, control select the axis to mirror about, and get my geometry. All right, so those were 10 millimeters and 10 millimeters. All right, so as soon as it mirrored, it made it a consistent line. So if I want the 10 millimeters, I'm going to go ahead and escape out of that and go between object and center line. Other than that, it really doesn't matter. We're going to still get a 20 by 20 box. Oh, and I hit the tilde, so it's trying to add a global variable. And no, I don't want a global variable. All right, so same thing with geometry. Do I want to include what, 8 fillets, 12, 14? Okay, can't count that high. Extrude. Thickness is of 16. All right, and then same thing with the, let's see, the inside did not get, so fillet. It was set to 10 millimeters. All right, we're 10 millimeters on the corner. As soon as I select the second fillet, I'm going to get the pop-up box, and it's going to allow me to say everything on the exterior connected to start loop. What did it find? 10 edges. And that gives me the shape. No. Oh, on the corners? Oh, these? All right, well, good time to go back and make the correction. All right, so I can go back in, edit the feature. I really wanted them to be, because from a manufacturing standpoint, that's another setup. All right, so deselect. I'm just going back through and reselecting those items that need to go away. All right, that looks a little better. Yep, all right, thank you. Okay, so when you need to get back into your features, you right click. Very top left is going to be to edit the feature. If it has a sketch associated to it, like the Boss Extrude, you're going to get edit feature, edit sketch. And then if you're expanded out, you can right click on the sketch, because things like sweep and loft may have multiple sketches. It's not a given that it'll just be edit that sketch. So you would right click on the sketch that you're editing, and it would go to edit sketch. And then the other one that I pointed out was to edit the sketch plane. So edit sketch plane should be used sparingly. All right, I put something on the wrong face, or that error that I generated because I went from the contour region to a standard extrude, and it lost its reference to that face. That was one of those. It's not apparent. It's not intuitive that you would have to reselect that face. But probably the other use then would be if I edit the sketch plane and I wanted this to go from the front plane to the top plane, I can pick that sketch up, keep my fingers crossed, and as long as I do not have a serious amount of geometry, probably by the third or fourth feature, I'm way too committed. If I have 2, I don't even want to think about it. But if it's something that I'm going through, I started on the front plane, this is going to be laying flat in the assembly on the top plane, that would be a better choice. If I catch it early enough, I can go in and change that sketch plane from the front to the top. Now it's going to mess with me because I'm going to keep hitting the control 1 to look at it. All right, so 210. Oh, I guess we leave that one. All right, so 211. Whenever you see the kind of the regular shapes of the polygons, we're going to go right to polygon. Drawing one of these and patterning it around does not appeal to me. All right, so the circles, yeah, I'm okay with patterning even the square if we wanted to mirror, but that's really not helping us. Origin would typically be at the center, so we'll start with that grouping. And was this was metric? So file new, art metric, front plane, sketch, and let's go with the center rectangle to establish our scale. And if this is called out 40 square, so this would be a case where I would go through and do the select, control select, and set to equal. I'm going to work this from the inside out. So wherever you want the circles, there's a couple ways to go about this pattern. Normally, I would go ahead and draw the base circle. All right, so the bolt circle or base circle of that pattern. All right, so let's see what happens if I don't, because I want to make a point or show you that, well, there's not a construction circle. We have to create the circle and then tell it it's for construction after the fact. So let's see what we get without the base circle, and then it'll either play out that the base circle is the most wonderful thing ever, or I really don't need it. But I like it there because it puts me in the frame of reference for generating that geometry. All right, so diameter of 20, and then from the origin out, we had a diameter of 20 or 120, so 60 on our position. And then under linear sketch pattern, we'll hit the down arrow, go to circular sketch pattern. It will automatically jump to the origin. If your pattern is off on the sheet somewhere, off on your material, then you're going to have to shift its position. All right, so these first two boxes are to say, give me a new X and Y center point. So as I shift those and make the adjustment, then it's going to update for that geometry. Equal spacing says that however many we end up with, what do we have, 8? They're going to stay equal spacing. If I had an irregular pattern, maybe it's only a 3/4 pattern that we're fitting 8 into, I would stop it and say 8 every 15 degrees as opposed to, what would we be at, every, now here I go doing math in my head again, 45 degrees. Had to stop and think about that one. Maybe it has been a long day. All right, so 60, pattern starting at 270. If we dimension the radius, that's going to give us 1. If I dimension the angular spacing, notice that the equal spacing got turned off. All right, so the dimension radius is going to, well, kind of override the 60 that I already put in there. So I'm not sure that I need that one. But we'll dimension to the angular spacing and see what it generates in the way of center lines. All right, so position-wise, I think we're okay. But most of the sketch patterns are going to have some additional item that we need to put into place. So I'm going to drag the endpoints of my construction geometry back to the origin, and that's going to be enough. All right, so if I didn't do that, let's see, I'm going to go to the construction circle, or go to the circle and then make it a construction circle. So there's my circle. There is no command, so we're going to go right to the options and say for construction. That's going to take that circle, send it into the background, but now I have it available for that geometry. Same thing, circular sketch pattern, 8 items, equally spaced. The radius is pretty much already dimensioned with the 60 that I put in first, and kind of the same thing. I'm able to move this pattern off and shift it away. Again, notice that I get a center point, and if I drag that center point back, that's going to cause it to go fully defined. The downside to the center point is when we get to the hole wizard, that becomes a hole wizard instance. Even if it's in open air, it's going to be counted. I'm going to have 8 actual holes and a 9th that is in free space. All right, so I can't emphasize enough that when you get into the drawing and you do an instance count and your geometry was generated by a hole wizard feature, and this number is not 8, it's 9, it's going to be because of that automatic point. All right, and then we'll go to the easy one, the polygon. We have is it the 16 sides? Inscribed circle. And I'm going to get that kind of flat. 1, 2, no, it's 12 sides, isn't it? 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so since I can't count, it lets me update until I accept the command. So it looks better. All right, not concerned about any of the items in the parameters. We'll just go ahead and accept. It'll stay in the polygon command, so whichever line that I can grab and make horizontal or vertical, that's going to be my starting point. So the inscribed circle is tangent to the flats. The circumscribed circle is through the points at the vertices, at the intersections. All right, so whichever one is that we pick on the geometry, or in this case, we'll go 180 across the flats. I could have just as easily picked that circle and had it create my geometry. All right. Again, these don't have to be in the same sketch. They could be feature one would be the outside, and then we would cut extrude the holes, and then we could cut extrude the box. And then blinding condition is 6. Okay. Let's see what the next one is. The next one's the spline. Well, I was wanting to get into the drawing, but I also want to get into the spline. So this one is going to be metric. It's also missing a dimension. So we have that symmetry thing going on. I'm going to build as much of the geometry as I can, and then I'll go back and do the spline as a second feature. So vertical infinite length, drop it on the origin. This time I'll hit L on the keyboard just to be different. Horizontal, up at a little bit of an angle, over, back, up, back, up. Whoops, a little too much on the scroll wheel. Over, and there was one of those kind of weird perpendicular inferences, but because it's in white and not yellow, it's not going to be applied. Horizontal, that will be applied, and I just need to bring it back to where I also see the coincidence, putting it to the center line. All right, so our dimensions. Oh, and I jumped right into inches, and after I said it was metric. All right, so as soon as I recognize millimeters, grams, and seconds, you just get back into the sketch. We're 40 by 20. And then 30. And the reason I want to do the spline is that the spline command changed a little bit in the last version, so I'm not sure if we can do the exact same thing with the style spline that we used to do through points. So see how much of a corner I can paint myself into. All right, 30, 40, 30. And then we had 20 and 20. No. And then 65. All right, so if I wanted to do the math and come up with 130, I could be on that side. We'll pull that back in though with 6. All right, how about 65 instead of 6? All right, so the inversion, not too worried about it, just have to identify the pieces that I can pull back. Select, Control, Select, and collinear. And then the missing dimension that we're not given, let's see, it's not quite, oh, did I jump over it? Yeah, I probably jumped over it. Since that's 20, it doesn't look like it's quite 20, so 15, 12, 16, any preferences? Pick one. 15. All right. So whatever is looking good, and because that is a missing dimension, this gets over to the assembly, it may be one of those that plays out that it's not. I made a bad guess. You made a bad guess. One of us made a bad guess. So that would be something that I would go inspection dimension. And again, because of my my strategy, I'm going to see if I can find it. Let's just go this way. I'm going to mark this sketch for the drawing. Or, I'm sorry, mark that dimension for the drawing. All right, so it kind of stands out in all of that. That one stands out as being different. Verify this dimension. All right, and then I'll go into the mirror, and we'll go ahead with the extrude. So basically I'm looking at this going, this sketch is complicated enough that I don't really want to deal with the spline on top of all those dimensions that I just put in. So the spline then, we'll just go, nope, I didn't want midpoint, I wanted center line, and I still missed. All right, from midpoint, and I'll just grab that endpoint and drag it back to the origin. We'll have a short segment of line, and then another short segment, and I believe that those are the same. They're both 5. So if I can get one of those placed, then it will finish out the both, and set to equal. Alright, so under spline then we have spline, style spline, and equation-driven curve. So that's going to be mathematical if you want to generate a parabola, if you want to generate a higher level function, then you can put in an equation for it, give it the variables, the from and to, basically the limits of your equation, and it will generate through that segment. Spline, we'll see what it gives. All right. So first segment, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. All right. So let's see if this is still. Now, so what's missing out of this this group? This is a continuous spline. Prior to 2016. I'd say, yeah, probably 2014, 2015, definitely. When you selected on the spline, each of these nodes would come up with a handle that would give you a magnitude of curvature and direction of curvature. So you could really twist this spline into some interesting shapes. So the original spline is buried, and I may still have it, the fit spline. Let's see if that one comes up. Oh no, sorry, that was the converting geometry. There's another one that will still bring up those handles so that you can build out the curvature. But basically, as we move through that geometry, these are going to try to stay tangent to each other. All right, so 10 millimeters. And then the first one was to 15. Interesting. And did not need that. So $20 to the first. So stretching out nicely, and then 55. And then the next one up was 70. All right, so hopefully as we put the rest of these in, and we're 20 from the top, it will come back around to look like our shape. Well, we got the length, so no, I did not want a length of the spline. All right, so that one came up to, we had 15, 20, And then the 15 is vertical again, so let's see, I didn't get that one in, that's why it's still strange. Alright, so 15. Oh, going over defined. Oh, we got a duplicate. I got it applied, I didn't get the number in. Alright, that's looking better. Alright, and then that point, that node point, and that mode point can be vertical. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, I did miss one. Alright, so I'm going to right click on the spline, and when you're in spline tools, then you get a whole new group of tools. Alright, so I need to insert a spline point since I counted 4 and put in 3. So one more spline point. That's going to add the node. Also make it to where it gets a little wavy. And let's see, that one is going to be at, well, that one was the 70. No, there were 3 points, wasn't there? 2, 3. Why didn't that come up on? So 20, 20. So I guess the question is, can I delete a node point? So making sure that I'm highlighted on that node point, and then either right-clicking or hitting delete, that will take it away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this segment, either 70, 55, and 20. This curvature isn't quite coming up the way that I expected it to. So let's see, control. So 20, 7, 55, 70, and then 20 to the outside, 15, and then those extend up, but we're not really getting that curvature back kind of the way I expected it to. So that's kind of an interesting result. And I don't have the handles to change. So, well, there's the curvature. So when we do the curvature scale, that's going to show kind of the degree of curvature, where it's flat up top and where it's a little more curved towards the bottom. So curvature combs. If we write, I can display the control polygon, and really, since everything's defined, I can't really move it. I haven't tried relax, so I'm not going to do that right now. Showing the inflection points will be where it changes direction. So there's no arrows because this didn't come around and change direction. It's all curvature in kind of the same arc in the same direction. Show minimum radius. All right, so the radius of 30.5. Yeah, so a variety of tools to help with, and then if we convert it to a style spline, that sounds a little scary by itself. So the style spline is a little bit different in its function. So let's go ahead and mirror this, and then we'll go back and see what the style spline does. And then I just cut extrude that through. All right, so not exactly like the drawing. Still not sure which one I'm missing, or what I overlooked, or if it's just the spline. We got the 3 points; they're on position. So, all right. So generated the geometry. We're going to switch over. 20, 20, 20, and then yeah, I'm going to have to break down and go get rid of my my font selection and get it back to something that we can actually read. So let's try the convert to style spline. will be approximated on the original curve, have different geometry, yes. Cannot to a pattern or is symmetrical to another spline. So it did not like me mirroring that. So if I take that one out, yes. Do you want to continue? Yes. Alright, so the style spline has the control polygon and is going to give us that ability to be able to drag those points around. But notice I've lost my node points on the spline itself, and I'm having to basically find those points away from the geometry. So control, convert. Let's see, back to customize. I don't want to spend too much time on this if I can find it quick enough. So under this we should have standard spline, the style spline, and then it looks like my my preferred favorite not available. Alright, so as long as it looks close, oh, I guess it would help if I mirrored that one back over. So as long as it looks close, it's in the geometry. So I'm going to play with that one a little more. If I find out anything specific, we will come back to that one. Alright. So let's pick one of these and go through a little bit more on the detailing. And we have the ones with the symmetry. So file, new. Let's go back to the standard templates so that since we haven't created one for this class, we'll stay with the landscape. So last time I went through and I set a blank, or selected a blank drawing template, and it had a scale factor in it, so it was pretty much the limits were around that scale. When we go into editing, one of the things that we can do is edit the sheet format. That will give us access to all of this, but I really don't want to do that every time. All right, getting rid of the geometry. So this will be our simplest drawing template. All right, so let's go ahead and pick and see if there's anything in the way of annotations. And when I come out of that, I now have a blank sheet that still has the numbers. So file, save as, and then this is going to be a drawing template. It jumps automatically to my location, and this is going to be well, I didn't want it to do that, so I'm not sure where I was at, but I started typing too soon. Okay, so a blank landscape. So if you've watched any of the template videos, this is only half of the equation. The other side is that once you've saved the drawing template is what shows up under new. The sheet format is the one that we actually are interested in. And so the sheet format I would like to put back, well, it jumped over there by default. And I'll go back to my list and give it the same name. And I know I had two of those, so hopefully I didn't get those confused. And then the other thing is under the properties, if I do not go back and select the same and make sure that it is showing up, oops, I hit enter too soon, make sure that it's showing up in this box. Alright, so the A blank landscape, any sheet that I try to add will revert back to whatever was in this box. So I'm going to apply changes, and then this is still, well, can't really see it, there it goes. This is still the DRW DOT and the solid part, or sorry, the solid the drawing template. Alright, so after we've generated that, we're going to go close it, make sure that it sets back to new. Now it should show up in the list. And the check is that I have the blank, and if I add a new sheet, it will also be the same sheet. If I get a different sheet, I did not do that last step correctly. That's the one I've always had problems with. I've always kind of forgotten to get it into that box. All right, so we're just going to detail the one sheet. So let's go ahead with the view palette. I think that's kind of the direction that we'll take. And then it reverts back. So be careful after you've messed with the templates and save back to that folder that whatever you save next, that you navigate to your working folder. And I still have to create the chapter 1. And we'll bring in 7. All right, so as I drag in the first item, and then the projected view and the isometric, I really have to decide, do I need the top? Probably not. Since we didn't set anything for center marks or anything back in the options, we're going to have to apply those manually. So since I have not built this into my template, I'm going to have to set it up, but this means that I set up layers, I set up line types, I set up all of this every time I open, until I save this back into the template, into the drawing document. It's going to be a per document basis. So we'll do this a couple times just so you see the process, but anything you find that you're repeating, you will want to build eventually into the template. So I'm going to set up a dims layer and set a color. These are kind of the standard ones that I like to use. And then a new, and we'll do just center. And also find a nice annoying magenta. Alright, and then my layers box was turned on by right-clicking and going into the layer. But once I locked, now this is kind of, the layer is only going to show up in the drawing module. And once I lock the Command Manager toolbars, if I want to move that layer from the bottom left anywhere else, I have to unlock, move it, and then lock again. And again, the lock is just so that I don't accidentally undock my Command Manager, move it somewhere that I don't want. All right, so we're in the centers, and I'm going to go to center mark. We can tell it for all holes, fillets, and slots. Well, probably not. Well, yeah, let's see what we get. We'll just turn them all on. All right, so it showed me the center of the slot. So slot center marks are shown as center defined or endpoints. And document defaults, angles. All right, so if this was out of position, we would default normally to 0 degrees, so along the axis, but if my part was skewed a little bit that I wanted that center mark to follow it, I could force it to follow it. All right, so I get the center points, and then I get the center points of the slot. The center line then is picking on my geometry, and the center line, let's get out of it, will continue until I deselect. And I'm just going to stretch it out a little bit so I can pull that geometry. So this one is mostly square, but I would still like to have that center line to be able to denote the symmetry. So going back over to the layers, nope, didn't want to get back into that. I just wanted to. Let's see if I can do that without stopping the video. So close. All right. So we go into the dims. And we can pick off of that center line, pick our dimensions. And now I'm more into something I'm familiar with setting up for the manufacturing. And then we had an overall. Alright, so as I go through and I'm picking, I don't like the direction, I can reverse the direction of the arrows. And then if I place those close, they'll be pretty much on. Okay, so move down. And then see if we can get one more for position. And then location-wise, let's see, that needs to have one go through there. All right, so other than the thickness, there isn't really anything that I needed on the right view. I could maybe put the overall if that that helped out, and there wasn't really anything on the top view that would have gone through. So again, my preference is the hidden lines removed, unless it adds something too, because well, we're going to get two lines in the isometric. But it just, to me, it's a cleaner look to not show the hidden lines. So again, my preference. So whatever I apply to the parent view is going to be applied to the right view, the left view, those other views. All right. So probably the takeaway, the note is that all of the annotations that would have come across the bottom, that would have traveled with the part and been associative to fill out the title block, all those are gone. I deleted them. I did not include them in this blank. So if I needed to put a note or I wanted to manually apply, 2-7, and I don't know what I just hit, but that was interesting. And I could go through and start to apply those annotations. All right. Again, that's not something I want to do every time, so I need to start developing and thinking about what I want to build into this template. The part name, the drawing name, maybe file locations, a date and timestamp. Those are the things that I would be interested in having in this template. All right, so kind of going to work by small degrees into the templates rather than throw it all at you at once. And then I'll throw it all at you at once. All right, so the dimensioning, the basic detailing portion, with any kind of drafting experience, you're going to be able to take it to whatever level you want to get to.